Welcome to the deep dive. We're tackling a really big one today. It feels almost like science fiction, but it's very real. China's electric vehicle boom.
Yeah, it's massive. We've been digging into your sources, specifically this BBC News video report, China's booming EV industry, and maybe just as interesting, the huge conversation happening in the comments under that video.
Exactly. So our plan is sort of two-part. First, let's really unpack what the video shows us. The situation on the ground, the tech involved, the sheer scale of it.
And then the second part, which I think is fascinating, is looking at how people actually reacted to that report. What jumped out at them? Were they surprised? What kind of different viewpoints popped up in that online chat?
It's not just the facts. It's how those facts land, right?
Totally. The reception is part of the story here.
Okay, so let's dive in. The BBC report, it kicks things off in Guangzhou, traditionally industrial.
Oh, yeah, but the reporter immediately shows this huge visual shift. The streets are described as a sea of green number plates.
And green means EV. That's the key signal there.
Right. The video shows them absolutely everywhere, not just cars, but electric mopeds, too. It really paints this picture of a city transformed. Even the sound is different. Less roaring engines, more of a gentle hum during rush hour, they said.
That's a powerful image. And it leads straight to the video's main point, doesn't it?
It does. The idea that for most countries, EVs are still the future, something we're working towards. But for China, the report argues the future has arrived. It's happening now at scale.
So why? How did this happen so quickly? The video points heavily towards government support.
Oh, absolutely. It stresses that there's government money, assistance available basically at every stage. If you're buying an EV, if you're a company building them, if you're supplying the electricity, even making the batteries.
That level of support across the board has really turbocharged these startups. They talk about this Silicon Valley kind of vibe, though apparently it's been a pretty intense competition. Only the strongest survive.
Definitely. And the video gives us some great specific examples. They feature XPeng, based in Guangzhou. This is a company that's, barely a decade old?
Something like that. And already a top 10 global EV maker. It's wild.
And their sales methods are interesting, too. They mentioned using internet live streamers to sell cars. Very modern.
The report zones in on their Mona model. Seems like it's aimed right at younger buyers, maybe first-time car owners.
Looks like it. And check out the features they pack in. This massive 15.6-inch screen, apparently super smooth. 18 speakers as standard. Heated, ventilated seats.
Whoa, stuff you'd normally expect on a, much more expensive luxury car.
Exactly. It really suggests these companies get what younger buyers want, maybe less focus on the old school brand status, more on the tech, the features, the connectivity.
And the test drive they showed seemed to back that up. Voice activation working well, video streaming in the car.
Yeah, and the reporter seemed genuinely impressed with the self-driving features.
That bit where the car just automatically slowed right down for vehicles driving the wrong way on the highway, that was pretty intense.
The reporter's reaction, we are alive, says it all.
And then he drops the price. All this tech, these safety features, for about $20,000 US.
That combination is, frankly, remarkable. It completely changes the game for what you expect at that price point.
And XPeng isn't just staying in China. The video says they're selling well in Europe, just launched in the UK back in March.
Right, seeing tremendous interest. They seem very focused on overcoming any sort of old stigma about things made in China, really trying to showcase the quality and the tech.
Okay, so that's XPeng. Then the report shifts focus a bit, takes us to NIO in Shanghai. Another startup, but with a different approach.
Yeah, NIO's big thing is battery swapping, tackling that whole charging time issue head on.
And the tech they show looks seriously advanced. You drive into this station and it's all automated. Machines just swap out your battery for a fully charged one.
And it's fast, 3 to 3.5 minutes. Faster than filling up with gas.
Wow. The system guides you in, assigns a battery, parks the car automatically using steer-by-wire. It sounds futuristic.
It really does. It's presented as this state-of-the-art solution to range anxiety, and waiting around for charging could be a real differentiator.
So summing up the video's perspective, after about 25 years of development, China's made high-end auto tech mainstream. And they're thinking big.
Very big. The video suggests Chinese manufacturers are seriously considering a future where they could, quote, pretty much build every single car for the world.
That's a bold statement.
Yeah.
And not surprisingly, it's causing ripples elsewhere.
Yeah, the video explicitly mentions worry in the West. You see things like tariffs being slapped on Chinese EVs that describes Western countries as desperate to catch up in green tech.
The final line is pretty clear. China has already changed the game.
A powerful conclusion. Okay, so that's the BBC's take. Rapid change, advanced tech, low prices, huge ambition, and a somewhat anxious West.
Right. But now let's pivot to that other layer, the comment section under the video, because this is where things get really interesting, maybe even a bit meta.
It really is. One of the first things you notice is just how many comments aren't just about the EVs themselves, but about the way the BBC reported it.
People seem genuinely surprised, some even found it funny, that the report didn't hit certain notes they expected when the BBC covers China.
Exactly. Like commenters at LuluApple1067 and at Dlorgli Xiaobo saying they kept waiting for the classic "but at what cost" line to drop.
And at Obamazoo pointed out the lack of what they called a dark and scary filter, saying it didn't feel like the usual BBC style for China stories.
Someone else at F1's Eyes flat out asked when the BBC ditched the gray filter and that "at what cost" angle, calling the report pretty unexpected. You see similar thoughts from at Personality at Regionum 5584 at its U834. A lot of people noticed a difference in tone.
It wasn't just observation. Some seemed genuinely taken aback, like
Yeah.
up at Gaming Pig 69 saying they couldn't believe the BBC was reporting it this way, or at MGZ, who literally forgot they were watching the BDC.
It tells you a lot about audience expectations, right? It suggests that a report focusing primarily on the tech, the scale, the business side, without immediately jumping to, say, geopolitical critiques, felt unusual to viewers who perhaps expected a more critical framing.
Fascinating meta-commentary on media itself.
Ah.
Okay, moving past the style reactions, lots of comments added real substance, sharing personal experiences that lined up with the video.
And this is where you get that valuable ground-level perspective. There was a great comment from @Tebony, who identified as a foreigner living in Chongqing.
Yeah, I saw that one. Really
It's
detailed.
super detailed. Said that in Chongqing, which is huge, easily 50% or more of cars are EVs now. And something like 90% of buses and taxis are electric.
Wow, 90% for public transport. That's incredible.
Right. And they mentioned seeing lots of the Chinese brands, plus plenty of Teslas, noting Tesla prices there are pretty competitive with the local options.
And they mentioned infrastructure,
Yeah,
because the video stresses the government role there.
they did. Described a whole network of charging stations that works across provinces, chargers everywhere, highway rest stops, parking lots, even down to villages in the countryside. It really backed up that idea of a massive, policy-driven rollout.
What about running costs? The video implies it's cheap because of subsidies.
They gave specific numbers, said they spend about $15 a month on electricity for their EV, compared to over $300 a month they used to spend on gas.
$15 versus $300, that's a massive difference.
Huge. Makes the running costs almost negligible. Their whole experience, including doing long road trips, led them to basically say, yeah, buy an EV if you're in China. And then they immediately wish for that same level of charging infrastructure and cheap electricity back home in Europe.
That's powerful testimony. And it wasn't just them. Another commenter at Ranfer mentioned visiting China recently and being blown away by the prevalence of EVs everywhere.
Yeah, they said the old gas-guzzling trucks really stuck out, looked totally out of place, reinforces that visual transformation the video described.
We also saw comments linking this EV boom to environmental improvements, which the video only hinted at with the sound change.
Right. At Carlos Lee 8396 talked about less air pollution. And at Boris 6747, who said they live in Guangzhou, remembered the bad smog back in the early 2010s and how happy they are to see blue skies more often now. That's a real quality of life impact.
So personal experience is largely confirming the video's points. But the comments also brought in wider comparisons and opinions, right? Looking at China versus other places.
Definitely. You had comments like at Tatsuma 6332 making a geopolitical point, contrasting China's development speed with others, and adding that China achieved it without invading anywhere.
And direct comparisons to the West. Kunid 12345 Johnny calling the U.S. EV industry a joke in comparison. At Windpurple 3828 took a sarcastic shot at the UK's HS2 high-speed rail project, saying it was far more advanced because it's invisible.
Ouch. Yeah, these comments definitely reflect a perception, fair or not, that China is surging ahead on this kind of infrastructure and industrial transformation compared to some Western countries.
And that desire for similar progress back home was a recurring theme, wasn't it? Beyond just the person in Chongqing.
Oh, yeah. Or at Doobie-Zero, wishing people in the UK could get these high-tech, self-driving EVs for under £30 K. At Ranfir, hoping the West catches up in their lifetime. At Bojack 3827 in London, lamenting the choking fumes and wishing for that electric hum.
It sets up an interesting dynamic. The video shows Western governments worried imposing tariffs. But some Western citizens in the comments seem to be saying, hey, we want what they have.
It's a definite tension. And on the government support angle, at RMQW3XC made the point that Tesla got significant subsidies in the U.S. too, suggesting maybe government backing for key industries isn't unique to China.
That's a fair point. There was also that specific story about NIO, wasn't there? From Winnow at JHMC820.
Yes, that was fascinating. They cited a report about a local government investing venture capital in NIO, bringing jobs. Then NIO went public. The government apparently made a huge return, like 5x their investment, and reportedly plowed that money back into local hospitals and schools.
Now that connects the dots between state investment and tangible local benefits in a really concrete way.
Absolutely. And just circling back to the speed, at BillyWoo12 put it starkly. China 5 years, Germany 50, Japan 30, Korea 20 to build their auto industries. Okay, maybe an oversimplification, but it captures that feeling of accelerated development.
Of course, not every comment was positive or accepting. We should mention those too.
True. Someone at Kokliang-Chu 3609 pointed out the reporter was standing in a bike lane, a minor detail, but an observation. And then there was at Blowly GC1zer, who seemed so surprised by the positive tone they threatened to report the video to the real BBC.
Which, again, speaks volumes about those pre-existing expectations of how China should be covered.
Exactly. Even the criticism reinforces that point about the reporting style being unexpected for some.
Okay, so let's try and pull this all together. We've got the BBC report showing this massive, fast-paced EV revolution driven by policy, resulting in advanced tech at low prices and global ambitions.
And then we have the comments section, which first largely validates that picture with first-hand accounts of the scale, the infrastructure, the low running costs. It feels real.
But secondly, the comments reveal this whole other layer about how the story itself is perceived. The surprise at the BBC's relatively straightforward, tech-focused reporting tells us a lot about audience expectations and perceived media norms when discussing China.
Yeah, that meta-commentary was a really strong theme. We can also see a clear line from the government support mentioned in the video to the real-world benefits people described that extensive charging network, the super cheap electricity. Policy translating into lived experience.
And globally, it's complex. Official Western response seems worried, defensive maybe with tariffs. But underneath that, you hear voices in the comments from people in the West who actually desire the kind of affordable, high-tech EVs and infrastructure they see developing in China.
It's a fascinating contrast. And finally, there's the question of who benefits or what it's for. The video says luxury mainstream. A commenter suggested it's for all mankind, viewing the car as a production tool.
They're not mutually exclusive views, maybe, but they offer different lenses on this huge industrial shift, bringing advanced tech to the masses versus a more fundamental shift in mobility as a tool.
Right. Both perspectives probably hold some truth.
So quite a journey we've taken here, digging into China's EV surge through the lens of the BBC report and, crucially, the conversation it sparked. We've seen the speed, the tech, the economics, the global waves it's making.
And adding that layer of commentary really brought it to life. The validation, the personal stories, the comparisons, even the debate about how the media tells the story.
It definitely leaves us with a lot to think about. So here's a final thought for you, the listener, to chew on. Considering everything we've unpacked, the incredible speed, the sheer scale, the complex reactions worldwide, what do you think is the single biggest challenge, or maybe the greatest opportunity, that China's EV revolution presents for the rest of the world?